Hey, you're listening to the morning show here on Raglan Community Radio. And now we're going to continue with John Lawson interviewing me about my new film. That sounds like I make films all the time, but I was making one film all the time. It took so long. So, yeah, to film, did I say the name? Xtreme Waste Community Enterprise, in case you've just tuned in. So that's what we're talking about. And John was going to ask me a question.
Yeah, we were talking about the...
Oh, hold on. There we go. I'll put your microphone back up.
Volume again.
Yeah, I just forgot then.
Needed to almost have a battle over it. We won't do that.
No.
So we were talking about the controversial bits of Xtreme Waste and the way that some community board members have been criticising them, and
not necessarily the current ones. There's been a historical.
It died down recently because the criticism was that they charged too much and dropped waste all over the place when they were collecting it.
Is that what people have said as well?
And that also there wasn't an annual inorganic collection. So how much of that did you cover in the film?
Well, I haven't actually ever heard anyone say that they drop stuff all over the place. And in actual fact, I actually went out for the film. I went out on the recycle run on the truck with them and filmed them. And the guys actually, the guys working there take their job very seriously, and they are really proud of the fact that they do a good job. And they also say they get a lot of compliments from people in the community about how, the job they do. So I think that, I don't know, there might have been a one-off incident that would have happened 11 years ago, and someone's remembered that. I don't know, because it's not...
I think you're probably right, yes.
Yeah. The cost issue, it's just wrong. They
So you go into that in the film?
Yeah. I've actually been into it in the studio as well. Just in terms of the cost, like if you go there and say, for instance, you want to dump a 60-litre bag, which is just standard rubbish bag size, like the blue bags and the traditional black bags. To dump at Xtreme Waste costs $2.70. To dump it in the transfer station in Huntly costs $4. To dump it up in the north part of the district costs $4. Even though Raglan is further away from the dump up there at Hampton Downs than all the others, so they're cheaper and they're further away and having to absorb more transport costs. So I got the charge sheets from Xtreme Waste, and the costs of things from Xtreme Waste and from the transfer station at Huntly, and everywhere you could probably compare a cost. Xtreme Waste was cheaper. Oh, except for tractor tyres. That was the only thing where they were more expensive. I don't know how many tractor tyres people have to take in. So that side of it, they're cheaper. There's the issue of if they were in a tender situation, would they be cheaper? And people tend to think they wouldn't be. I think it would be pretty. I actually think it would be pretty close in terms of cost. But what you've got to remember is that there's way more to it than that. For starters, I mean, if they have to go to a tender for their contract change, I hope the tender includes issues like the fact that they are recycling 75% or diverting 75% of Raglan's waste from landfill, and I would hope that would be taken into account. So the commercial operator had to do that as well, because one of the ways the commercial operator is cheaper is because they don't do the difficult stuff that Xtreme Waste does, like Xtreme Waste. I can't remember if they still do it now, but they were taking oil for free, even though it would cost them to get rid of it because they didn't want it to be poured down the drains and go out into the harbour. So because they're a community enterprise, a non-profit charitable organisation, they're not solely focused on profit. So there's all sorts of stuff they do that a commercial operator wouldn't. So, but typically the tender situation doesn't take that into account.
Well, it depends how you set the tender. I think that's one of the arguments that's going on at the moment, is it? As to just what should be in the tender requirements. Yeah,
and then beyond that, like that's just when you just compare two prices like that. That's what they call cost accounting. But actual economics looks at the flow and effects of the different enterprises, the community enterprise and the business enterprise, and the effect that has in town. And I especially go into this because there's a big difference. And I'm not going to go into the details because I want people to see the film, but it'll end up being discussed around town anyway for people who don't go. But it's significant, I would say.
Because one of the other criticisms on price was that they got charged a different price each time they went up there.
Well, that depends whether you think the person... Yeah, that depends whether you think the person who's saying that is better at estimating the volume of waste on a trailer compared to the people who work there and do it every day. Because that's what it is. It's one person's word against another. So you know, and I know, having worked in the building industry where we're always measuring things, like I know that most people actually aren't very good at measuring distances and volumes, especially outside where everything seems smaller than it does if you take it inside. It's a bit of a trick that the mind plays on people. Like if someone, for example, and I'm getting off track here, but if someone you go to this empty section where they're about to build a house and you mark out where the house is going to be, the first thing they say is, "Oh, it looks too small. It's way too small." So it's just a trick the mind kind of plays because you're out in the field. So unless someone's got actual proof, I just think they don't know what they're talking about, to be honest.
Okay. And
I've probably insulted a whole lot of people who are listening, but
we have got a phone number here if people want to ring in and talk to us.
Shall I give them I'll give them your phone number.
I read the one out that's over there, 8252981.
Thanks, thanks, John.
And so if you want to call in and have a comment on this conversation that's going on between me and Aaron, you can do. But one of the other things we haven't talked about so far is the annual inorganic waste collection. And some areas think of that as a really good way of recycling because people put all their rubbish out the same day and it's sort of like a big garage sale for free.
And everyone, I've seen that. I remember that when I lived in Auckland. It's more of a swap than a collection. Yeah, it is kind of funny. But then again, I don't know how funny it is having all this waste strewn all up and down the road. Like in Auckland, it was a couple of weeks at least that it stayed outside where I lived. That's a long time ago.
So is that the reason for not having it here? Because the rest of the district does have it, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, see, Xtreme Waste is innovative and doing new things. So, and it's a new model of doing things, and it's a model that more and more places are following. You know, more and more parts of what they do are being picked up to become standard all over the place. So I think for them, the idea is to get all of the waste in Raglan and then see what they can do with it. And some of that stuff is profitable for them. Some of that stuff can be cleaned up as well and turned into. You keep looking at your watch, John.
I'm just checking we're not going over time.
Oh, it's all right. I'll keep an eye on that. Yeah, and they know good markets to send stuff, and they can rebuild some of the items as well. So, I don't actually know. I don't know.
So you didn't go into that in the film?
Not the organic one, no. So I'm kind of guesstimating a little bit about what that was about.
Okay, well let's talk about what's in the film. If it's not in the film, just say it's not in the film.
Oh, okay, right. I was just trying to think of an answer because by now I've learnt a lot about Xtreme Waste, but I haven't actually asked why that was. But I just think.
Because maybe next time you talk to Rick, you can ask him that question. But let's concentrate on what's in the film. And why
did that happen? Not. Yeah, and there's
having
also
seen the trailer, I'm not sure what is and what isn't in the film, so I'm asking you questions to try and find out.
Well, the trailer doesn't really tell you what is or isn't in the film anyway. I found that making. In actual fact, I didn't want a trailer. You often give away key parts of the film or important parts or parts that are going to be a surprise you want to build up to. So I actually put a lot of footage in the trailer that's not in the movie. So I don't know if that helps or not. I had a heap of footage, absolutely heaps.
But rather than waste it, you thought, let's stick it in a trailer. Yeah,
well, there were some things that I really wanted people to see, and it just didn't work for the film. So I was quite glad to be able to put them in the trailer. So yeah. So what else is in the film? We look at like the community aspect of it and the community support. We look at.
Do you look at how it got going and?
Yeah, how they got started. Absolutely, yeah, because that's probably the most inspirational thing about what they've done is how they started with literally nothing, and it's a bit of a Kiwi tradition, but it's also especially a Raglan tradition that if we see a problem with something on an issue we think needs to be dealt with, we just get on and do it and sort it ourselves. We don't sit around in Raglan. We don't sit around and moan that someone should, why isn't the government fixing this? We just go out and do it. Well, there's certain aspects of that in Raglan, like Harbour Care is another really good example of that. So, we do look at that.
Because have you worked out why it should be Raglan rather than anywhere else in the country that started this off and indeed started Harbour Care off?
Well, yeah, I think. I mean, I don't get into that explicitly but the film is basically a lot of it is about that Raglan spirit. Like you get a real feel for that. And in fact, a friend of mine who he makes films in the UK, so I sent him over an early cut just to get some feedback because I'm making this entirely by myself. And he said he wanted to move to Raglan after watching the film. So I think I managed to communicate some of that Raglan vibe there as well.
Maybe you can get David Peacock to fund it, and he'll fill his 500 houses over there quickly.
I don't know. I think the people it would attract might not be people who want to be involved with a commercial development like that. They're probably all the people who want to get an acre somewhere and have a few chickens and ducks and things.
Yeah, because having made the film, does it make you feel you want to have a sequel to it or follow up with maybe Harbour Care or something?
Well, Harbour Care's been in a lot of things. So, no, it doesn't, because I'm really tired, John.
Okay, so that was one of the motivations, was it, that Harbour Care had more coverage than...
No, it was... No, just because I knew a little bit more about Xtreme Waste, I think. I had interviewed Rick a couple of times back in the days when I did Under the Radar. And also back then, Susa Cooper used to do an Xtreme Waste show, so they were much more involved with the community, as they need to be, because it's the rubbish pickup, and everyone has that. Whereas Harbour Care is more to do with the rural community, I think.
Did you, in the film, do you go into the effect of having a longer contract, in that they've been able to buy more equipment and put in more capital because they can afford to look several years ahead and see that the profit from recycling is going to cover the cost of those things over more than just 1 year? Yeah,
absolutely. Well, never mind the profit. Just the fact that they have a guaranteed contract for 7 years means that people will lend the money, for that length of time.
Mm-hmm. So I suppose I'm using the word profit loosely because they're a non-profit organisation.
Yeah, they are, but they have they want to generate a surplus every year. Otherwise you're living too close to the bone. So even though they're a non-profit organisation, they still need a surplus to cover if something goes wrong, or. The other thing too they do with the surplus is if they have a really good surplus, that means that they can do they can look at recycling stuff that's even more expensive to recycle, or they can pick up a new project or something like that. So yeah,
because the aim is to get to zero waste, and we're still quite away from that because there's still quite a few things that they can't recycle. I discovered they can't recycle number 7 plastic bags.
Part of that was what happened with China refusing all the plastics. China.
That's in the film, is it? Or
no.
Whilst you were finding out all about it.
I tried to jam it in there, but it really didn't work, so I took it back out again. But basically, China doesn't want all the dirty recycling that the world has been sending it. So, Xtreme Waste and Raglan, our recycling's not dirty. It would be fine, but they have to. It used to go on the same boat with everything else from New Zealand, and so. Yeah, I think China felt like they were just being used as a great big dump site, getting all these container loads, boatloads of dirty recycling, and they just said no, we've had enough. So that's why they can't recycle some of the stuff that they were, or I don't know, maybe they're still taking it and they're just trying to do something with it. But
because with the steel yard and the timber yard, they've made a start on actually reusing things on site rather than sending them off somewhere else to be reused. So is that something you look at all in the film as to how that might develop and how it has developed so far with those two projects?
Not especially, because that's kind of another sideline, a little sub-story of the main story. It could be a little diversion. But yeah, that is. It kind of comes under the whole idea that because they're not a commercial organisation, their main aim is to go for zero waste. That they'll try all sorts of things to see if they can find a way to recycle stuff. So you won't find a commercial operator recycling wood quite the same way that they do. Yeah.
Yeah. So. Because it started off as the dump, didn't it? So people got used to the idea of a dump, and I think that was back in the 50s. In fact, do you cover the history of how Raglan's got rid of its waste? Because at one time there were dumps all over the place, and then in the 50s the council decided the dump ought to be up there. And
I don't go that far back. Was that right? There were dumps all over the place?
Well, the museum's built on a dump, so yeah.
There?
Quite a few other, yeah.
Somebody told me the other day that the Hamilton Gardens beside the river, all the beautiful gardens, those manicured different types of gardens, and everything's beautiful.
Right, yes.
That used to be the dump in Hamilton.
Yes.
Which is really astounding now.
In the days when Hamilton poured all its sewage into the river.
Yeah, times have changed somewhat. But I don't go back that far with Raglan, but I do have a look at what it was like beforehand. And I managed to get my hands on some photos of the old dump, which was really interesting. And there's
because that's still being monitored for toxic waste in it, isn't it? Which could pollute the harbour, or maybe even is polluting the harbour.
Well, it shouldn't be polluting it as much. It better not be, because my kids have been swimming down that part of the harbour. But no, they're
still here.
Yeah, they are. They're looking healthy. That's something that Fred Lichwak and Harbour Care have actually sorted out. Is that in the farm that where the leachate was running through, is they've put lots of planting to soak up that leachate. And in the end, that's all that planting will be taken to another landfill somewhere and dumped when it's time to put new plants in. But at least it's not going into the harbour through the area where kids swim, and it's not affecting the shellfish and all that. So,
last week I took some photos from over near the trig point on the Wainui Reserve, and I was quite surprised when I looked closely at them just how hard it was to see where Xtreme Waste was, because it's got all those trees around it now, which it never used to have.
Yeah, well, I think that was part of the deal, that they had to shield. Basically, the neighbouring farm. They had to shield everyone from the unsightly state that it was. But that's Marty Koning's farm there. In fact, he said to me, it was interesting because I went and got some access on his farm to film a bit as well, and he remembered back in the day before Xtreme Waste when it was just a dump, and a lot of the stuff just used to blow onto his farm. So I'm sure he's a lot happier having a transfer station and recycling centre than a windy dump.
Yeah. And did you actually learn a lot in doing the film, do you think? Did you become more enthusiastic about Xtreme Waste at the end of it than you were at the beginning? Yeah,
I definitely was, because I got an insight into it's really multi-layered in terms of how it benefits Raglan. Like, there's the obvious thing of recycling is good for the environment, and because they're a charitable organisation, they're more focused on recycling than making profits, so they do more recycling. But then there's the economic benefits to the town, which I've said I go into, and the thing of having jobs for people that are in Raglan, so people don't have to go over the hill, and it kind of makes, and just more jobs that keep people here and keep people in regular employment, because it used to be a lot of seasonal stuff. That just makes the community a little bit more stable, and families under less stress, and it kind of all follows on. I don't really go that far into detail, because again, that kind of was going off on a tangent, but there's just a thing like that. And also, being able to buy stuff cheap is really good for people on low incomes. And
do you think the film might help with education to encourage people to do more recycling? Because I'm surprised at the amount that ends up in the blue bags every week. I tend to put one blue bag out a year, so when I see two blue bags
a year? Outside, well, you don't have so many people living at your house, yeah.
But most things can be recycled or composted or whatever, so there's not all that much. There's toothpaste tubes and things like that. But
it depends how focused people want to get on it, and I guess like they did it.
Be an awful lot that's in those blue bags that could be in fact be in the recycling bin.
You're right, yeah, and and they've been looking at dealing with the food waste, and hopefully that'll come online at some stage over the next year or two. But yeah, you're right. There is stuff, and it all depends on the people at the other end, how keen they are to recycle. And Xtreme Waste has in the past been really successful. Like when they started, they put a lot of effort into communicating with the community, and
Susa did a lot in that direction.
Yeah,
but I'm just wondering if the film also is aimed at doing that to some extent.
That's not an aim. I didn't want to make it that kind of in your face thing, like. Especially like anyone who's familiar with my old Under the Radar show, it was a bit more like telling the world about its problems, and here's the stuff, and you've got to do something about it. And now John's just gone off with a phone call. Can you believe it? It's very rude. I kind of wanted to do something different. I didn't want to be in that. A lot of people make a lot of films, and a recent film, Trashed, was like that. It was a really good film. It was shown at the film festival last year, It was a really good film, but it was in your face and kind of scary about the problems with waste and that sort of thing. And they did try to look at the positives at the end, but I didn't think they did a very good job of that. Whereas this comes from the complete opposite point of view of just only looking at the positives. We already know there's, everybody knows there's environmental issues. Everyone knows there's too many plastic bags. We all know that.
Do we all know, or do half of us know?
Everybody knows. Some people just would voluntarily stay in denial. you know.
Because the supermarket did try getting rid of plastic bags, and they claim there was opposition from customers.
There will be, and people and people at that point will suddenly become really visible. You know, when they're forced into a change like that, they'll be upset. My whole life I've got a plastic bag, or maybe paper bags back in the day, but you know, and now you've taken my plastic bag away, and that's not on. And a customer is always right anyway in a business, so what can they do?
But which customer?
Yeah, it might have been. It might be a very small percentage of the population. But for me, I don't see any point in depressing people anymore with stuff.
Because I tend to use Warehouse and Pack and Save because they don't shove things in plastic bags.
Yeah, sometimes you have to fight them off, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the presumably two types of customers, and I'm just wondering whether this film will encourage more customers to become like us.
I think in terms of what it might encourage is it might encourage more people to think about doing something about the problems in their town. That's something that I hope that people will get out of it, and I hope it will. You know, that's the thing. It's more likely to energise people than a film like Trashed, which depressed a few people. You know, not saying it was a bad film at all. It was a really, really good film, but
because it probably raised quite a lot of awareness. Because I didn't know there were huge heaps like the one shown in Trash. So.
Well, no, those huge rubbish piles overseas. No, I didn't know. I didn't know about them. They are somewhat frightening. But in terms of what we can do, you know, like Xtreme Waste has shown what we can do locally. We can properly solve a problem, and we can provide jobs, you know, and we can clean up the town. You know, they've done multiple things, and they've created they're part of that Raglan vibe of being a little bit different and doing our own thing and solving our own problems.
Because it's always seemed to me that the solution ought to be with the people who originally produce the rubbish, the manufacturers, and that they ought to be responsible for getting it reused, recycled, whatever.
Well, yeah, and this is something that Xtreme Waste and the rest of the community recycling network in New Zealand have been involved with, and legislation has been passed, and there's still more pressure going on from them to put more legislation on, and that makes the manufacturer bear some of those costs.
Yeah. Do you look at that in the film at all?
No, I don't look at that.
This is the 10-hour version that you can...
Yeah, that's a 10-hour version, yeah. I'll give you the raw material, John. You can sort through it. It's a lot of raw material. Did you know what I had to do? The hardest part of it was the transcriptions. Because I interviewed about over 20 people, and then I had to transcribe so I could find in the footage all the bits I wanted.
Yeah.
And I'm not that fast a typer.
Okay. So there's no simple electronic way of doing it these days?
Well,
word recognition isn't up to it?
Not with a Kiwi accent, no. No, I sort of tried that with one thing, but it really, really didn't work. So, you know, it just came down to me transcribing.
Yeah, so this is why it's taken 4 years to produce.
Oh, that, and I have to live my life as well, you know. So, yeah. And there were whole... It's not like I was working on it every spare moment for the last 4 years. There were whole months went by where I didn't look at it, or longer, so, yeah. But please, it's done.
Yeah, you were talking about the equipment you've been using. Is that something that most people could take up if they thought they wanted to make a film about something?
These days, yeah. These days, filmmaking is open to people with just a little bit of money, really. Like a basic computer. Like the computer I got to do it, I got a few little extra things in just that were particularly good for the filmmaking. But they only cost $2,500, which is, you know, a few years ago that was a standard price for a computer. So that's not expensive, and that's the whole editing, you know, ready to go. And the films, I mean, now you get a second-hand camera that you can record video with, and the quality's good at HD quality, and you know it's all good. So yeah, people can do it really cheaply now, and lots of people are. Yep. Have you been on YouTube lately?
To watch this trailer, yes.
Oh, that's all, to watch the trailer. Yeah, so I should remind people where the trailer is. Actually, I wonder if that thing's ready. I'm going to have a website, extremewastefilm.com, and just before John came in, I was trying to set up that domain, but it was making me wait for an hour. So
because computers are like this, aren't they? Sometimes they work perfectly, and other times they're really frustrating, and you take ages to do what you want. It's rather like the radio show that I did on Tuesday. I thought I can just plug my memory stick into the computer here and it will read it, and it came up with a load of rubbish. So
I hope you recycled it.
I had to put some music on and sort it out. But,
yeah, computers. Well, this is normal. This is what they said. It took a while, but the domain name for the website for the film will be shortly, later on today, extremewastefilm.com. Otherwise, you can go to YouTube and look for Extreme Waste Community Enterprise. And failing that, you can wait till the weekend of the raft race, and we'll show it somewhere in town, yet to be sorted out. So, thank you, John.
Okay, well, thanks for making the film, and I look forward to seeing it.
And I hope you feel more, you know more about it now.
Yep. Maybe I can reduce my waste.
Yeah, I don't think you could.
Every 2 years.
One blue bag a year. That's quite impressive.